Incoming transfer James Okonkwo has wrapped up competition at the FIBA U20 European Championships, and his performance there has me wondering, are we undervaluing what Okonkwo brings to the table?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Monday, July 17th, 2023. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and I want to thank you for making our show your first listen or watch every single day. Coming up on today's show to kick off the new week, Carolina got a big-time wide receiver commitment on Sunday afternoon. We'll talk about that. And ACC football and basketball coming to the CW? Okay. We'll talk about all of that, but first, I want to talk about James Okonkwo. For those who maybe have tuned out or are first-time listeners or watchers of the show, first off, welcome. We're glad you're here. James Okonkwo is the most recent Carolina basketball commitment, transferring in from West Virginia in the wake of all the Bob Huggins hullabaloo. How's that for a word for you? And Okonkwo was scheduled to actually visit Carolina in about a week's time from now, was planning to do that after the FIBA Under-20 Euro Championships, but went ahead and committed to North Carolina before all of that started. It was kind of a surprise in terms of timeline, not necessarily so much in terms of him committing to North Carolina. There was some smoke picking up for that ahead of his commitment. Well, the reason I want to talk about it is we've been looking at Okonkwo as like a depth piece that might be able to help out some in the front court this season. Probably won't do much. Didn't really do too much at West Virginia. But the thing is, that's exactly what I and many others have been saying Carolina needed on their roster this year, was a player like Okonkwo who could be some depth in the front court that would be okay coming off the bench behind Baycott or Jalen Washington or whomever it would be. Well, here's the thing, though. I don't know how much we should take away from these European Championships that ended on Sunday. He was playing in the B division, we'll say that, and it is, not high-level Division I basketball. That said, have we undervalued him? That's what I want to ask. So you might be wondering, why European Championships? Well, if you're not aware, James Okonkwo is British and so is playing for the UK, my home country where I was born, in these championships. Now, Pat Kilby and I are going to do a full show on Okonkwo here in a couple weeks as we continue on through our summer roster preview series. If you've missed the first two episodes of that, go back and check it out. We've done Elliot, Cadeau, and Zayden High, both of the freshmen. So what I want to figure out today is ask the question, based on what Okonkwo did at these Euro Championships, are we undervaluing him, or is it more about competition level, or maybe just opportunity that he didn't have at West Virginia and he's had this all along? Regardless of the answer to this question, what Okonkwo shows me through his performance at the FIBA U20s is that when given the opportunity, he's going to snatch it. He's going to rise up and take it. Part of this, for again, to introduce Okonkwo to those who might not be aware of him, is not a lifelong basketball player. Pretty recent newcomer to basketball, grew up as a tennis player, and has only been playing basketball the last several years. So all of this, take it with a grain of salt, and that's where we're at. So some takeaways from the FIBA Under-20 Euro Championships. James Okonkwo started every game for Team UK. 7 games in total, 4 pool games, and then 3 kind of placement games. They didn't make the top medal round. UK finished 8th in this field. In those 7 games, though, James Okonkwo had 4 dub-dubs, what I like to call double-doubles. Some people probably hate that, like cheesy, but I think it's fun and endearing. Okay, 4 dub-dubs. He had 5 double-digit rebounding games in all, 5 double-digit scoring games in all. It's just that 2 of those didn't line up. here's the interesting thing, right? We talk about Okonkwo as a guy that's like 6'8", 6'9", so not necessarily like a typical like rim protector, get out of my way, I'm going to end your life if you come into the lane. But he is a guy whose length and athleticism allows him to get blocks. To wit, he had blocks in 6 of the 7 games of this tournament, including 6 in one game against Hungary. 6 blocks in one game. Pretty cool stuff. Another thing, if you had been tracking with me in the past week or so, you had heard me voice some concerns over Okonkwo's turnover numbers. He had 8 in one game in pool play, like 6 in another and 4 in another. I forget the first game. That was, I think, games 2, 3, and 4 of pool play. But he did a nice job cleaning those up after pool play. In those final 3 games of being seeded, had just 1, 2, and 2 turnovers. So much more encouraged by that. I know both ways. It's a small sample size of just 7 games, but it is nice to see that number come down. Here's another thing. Because of who he is and what he does, is typically going to have a pretty high field goal percentage. A lot of around the basket stuff, although he was attempting threes. I'll say that in a second too. And had one game we'll talk about in a second where he was insanely efficient. But what I do want to say is Great Britain's final game on Sunday afternoon, it was his worst shooting game for Okonkwo. I believe he was 2 of 9 from the field. Yeah, 2 of 9 from the field. But what I love to see is that even on a day when he was not shooting his best, he was affecting the game in other ways, finding other ways to fill out the box score like this. 8 rebounds, one of just 2 games where he didn't have double-digit rebounds, 4 assists. If I remember correctly from the box score, he was the leading assist man for his team in this game, 3 steals and a block. So again, just a couple points in that game on Sunday, 4 points, but he had 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, and a block. That is what winning basketball players do, is find ways to help the collective team even when they are not doing their best. So all of this come together for James Okonkwo. Here's another thing. We've talked about that at West Virginia. He was not much, wasn't a 3-point shooter. If I remember correctly from his stats, I don't have it pulled up in front of me. I'll try to pull it up while we're talking here. Was 0 of 2 in his 2 years at West Virginia from the 3-point line. Let me look back at his 0 of 6, excuse me. Still 0 3-point attempts his freshman year. And of course, he only played 3 games, and then 6 3-point attempts last year, didn't make any of them. What's interesting to me is that in this FIBA tournament, he attempted at least 1 3-pointer every game. Now, he only made 2, but the fact that he was taking them is an encouraging sign. It shows that he has at least enough confidence to step out and try it. It shows that maybe Carolina could be getting more than just a completely in the paint guy with him, that as he learns the game of basketball more and more, the capability to step out and knock that down from time to time could be there. So that is another potential encouraging sign to me. And obviously the coaching staff will work with him. Now, in terms of tournament averages, right, we look at, great, you did well in this one game, but how do you do across the course of a tournament? When we think about somebody like Armando Bacot, who averages a double-double each of the past 2 seasons, for example, not too many guys across the ACC do that. If I remember correctly, in the entire ACC last year, there were 3 players who averaged a double-double. Armando, Norchadomir, and Jesse Edwards from Syracuse, who transferred over to West Virginia and is staying there. Somebody fact check me on that, because I might be wrong, but I feel like it was just those 3 guys. If not, it might have been 1 or 2 others. Anyway, in this tournament, James Okonkwo averaged a 1/10 of a rebound shy of averaging a double-double. He had 12.1 points per game and 9.9 rebounds per game. And again, I know this is not ACC competition. I know this is the B division, whatever. Doing this is a big deal. And here's another thing. I shot exactly 50% from the field, 36 of 72. For somebody that's not much of a 3-point shooter, I'd like to see that get higher. But he is, I think, working on trying to step out more. So I understand why that might be dropping off down to 50%. But It's not nothing, right? From the free throw line, Okonkwo wasn't awesome at West Virginia. Let me look back at those numbers. In this tournament, he shot 68% from the free throw line. At West Virginia, he was a 60.5% free throw shooter. So him shooting better, albeit once again in a smaller sample size, just 16 attempts, but still 68.8%. That's great. He also averaged an assist, averaged 3.6 turnovers. We talked about that. Got to cut that down. Just shy of a steal a game, 0.7. But here's a number that leaps out at me. Averaged 2.1 blocks per game. And again, Carolina has to have more rim protection. And this is something that Okonkwo can bring. And so I am really encouraged by that. You can go back and look at all his stat lines. I won't walk through it, but I just want you to hear me say that I think that, yes, there is some, going back to our initial question, are we undervaluing him or is it a level of competition thing? I think there definitely is some level of competition to it, but I'm going to put my hand up and say, I believe that because of what Okonkwo did or didn't do at West Virginia, that I'm undervaluing what he will bring to the Tar Heels. And I am hopeful for that. You've seen it in this competition, and I'm hopeful that there are some great things he can bring to Carolina. Obviously, the guys are already in, getting together, running, and Okonkwo, haven't heard specifically yet on when he will get to Chapel Hill. Literally just finished this FIBA competition on Sunday. So, I'm kind of hopeful he'll be able to get home, maybe spend some time with his family or be able to say his goodbyes at West Virginia and then come on down to Chapel Hill. So we will keep our eyes on all of that with Mr. James Okonkwo. Coming up next, Carolina got a big time commitment from an in-state wide receiver on Sunday afternoon. It's great news for the Tar Heels, who were trying to fill out the top part of that 2024 incoming football class. We're going to talk about it in just a second. But first, I need to tell you that today's episode of Locked On Tar Heels is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Hey, take that first swing at betting on MLB right there on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets, up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who's going to hit the first home run in a game. And this all comes on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantaneously. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Hey, you everydayers, I just want to take a minute to say thank you so much for being with us. Even right now, in the middle of July, in the midst of summer, it's just fun to get to continue talking about Carolina athletics, even when there aren't Carolina athletics going on. Now, I know you might have some topics you're thinking of that you'd love to hear. Maybe a list you want to hear me walk through or something of that nature. Maybe it's a topic you want to hear. Would love it. If you want to do that, let me know something you'd like to hear. Submit it. LockedOnTarHeels@gmail.com, or you can send me a DM on Twitter or the show on Twitter as well. Don't forget also, you can submit video questions for us. We're going to have a mailbag coming up in a couple weeks, and so I want to start gathering some of these video question submissions just for that mailbag episode. You can submit those LockedOnTarHeels@gmail.com. Give us your name, where you're from, and just really quickly your question, and we'll get your face and your voice on the show. All right, Sunday afternoon, Carolina got a commitment from class of 2024 4-star wide receiver Jordan Shipp from Providence Day School there in Charlotte. And Shipp chooses the Tar Heels over NC State. Yeah, what up, Wolf Puppies, and Michigan. And so you love to see that. Also, I saw that one of Shipp's teammates there at Providence Day School, I'm assuming he's committed to NC State. He's wearing an NC State t-shirt, gave him a bottle of wine and some cheese for the wine and cheese crowd. Nice try, bro. I hope Shipp scores all over you and pours that champagne on your no. That's probably illegal because he's only 8 or not even 18. He's still just a senior in high school. But anyway, seriously, nice try, NC State. Bitter fans, and there is that. What I love about Shipp's commitment is that it means that Carolina is continuing to do work landing high-end wide receiver prospects or high-end wide receiver recruits to come to Carolina. Have been doing it quite a bit now, and I'll say a little bit more about that. You might be wondering, hey, Isaac, are we going to talk about Jordan Shipp's game? And we will, with Locked On's football recruiting insider Brian Smith later in the week. Today, what I want to talk about is what Shipp's commitment means for North Carolina and kind of my takes on why I think it's a big deal both now and for the future. Now, obviously, part of a big-time wide receiver coming to your program is knowing that they've got a really rad quarterback throwing to them, right? And so for these guys that have come in recently who knew they had Sam Howell or even more recently, Drake May, it's like, I trust that. Now, I know there isn't somebody that we believe is Drake May's caliber behind him right now, but Carolina has proven that they're going to do the work to get that, whether it's the development of an in-house quarterback or going to get somebody in the transfer portal, which is just kind of the deal now. I loved in Shipp's comments, he said that he's excited about Chip Lindsey's offense and went to the spring game specifically to see that. Tells me that obviously Drake May won't be at North Carolina when he comes. And so that says that Jordan Shipp is a Carolina guy, regardless of whether Drake May's there or not, right? And so there's this belief that Carolina is going to continue to get big-time quarterbacks, and that is a big deal on the recruiting trail. So again, later in the week, we'll get Brian Smith's take and his thoughts on Jordan Shipp's game, what he'll bring to Carolina. But I just want to say a couple more things about what I think it means for the Tar Heels. With Shipp's commitment at 247 Sports, it moves Carolina's 24 class up to 22nd at 247 Sports. You love to see continuing to stay in that top 25. Shipp himself is 6'2", 195. Let me say 4 things to you. It's always good, number one, to keep in-state players home. Since Mac Brown has come back, he's talked ad nauseum about that in a good way. I don't mean like, oh, Mac, shut up about, like, I love that he just continues to hammer it home that we're going to win the Carolina kids. And I know getting a lot of Virginia and South Carolina and Georgia boys and Florida boys, that's great too. But got to continue to win the state of North Carolina and need to get back to winning the state of North Carolina on the field. Got to end this losing streak to NC State. So number one, always good to keep in-state players home. Number two, always good to beat out NC State. You just don't want to lose to them. That is the embittered football rivalry. So always good to beat them. Thirdly, always good to beat out a Big Ten school. And not just any Big Ten school, but a top flight Big Ten school in Michigan. And so beating out a local rival and then beating out a national power, man, anytime you can beat out Michigan or Ohio State or Georgia or Clemson, right? Like any of that is big time for the Tar Heels. And so you love to see that. And then fourthly, it's always good to see that Carolina is building yet another strong wide receiver class. I mentioned it earlier, but let me dive into a little more about what I mean by that. Last year's class, the freshmen right now for 2023, a pair of in-state 4-star wide receivers, Christian Hamilton and Chris Culliver. And then also a third wide receiver, Paul Billups from Virginia. He's a 3-star. Not to mention, obviously, we know bringing in transfers Tez Walker and Nate McCollum, who project to be, two of the main integral parts of the passing game this year. So 2023 class, 2 in-state 4-star wide receivers. 2022 class, another pair of 4-star wide receivers, not in-state, but both from Virginia, in Ty Chapman and then Andre Green, who we hope to take a massive step forward this year as you lose Antoine Green and Josh Downs. And then this year, so we look at those pairs of 4-star wide receivers of the past 2 years. Here's why I mention that. Because Shipp is the second wide receiver in this class. The Tar Heels already have 3-star Keenan Jackson out of Weddington High School in Matthews, North Carolina. Shipp is a 4-star. And a reminder that Carolina is in the mix for another in-state 4-star wide receiver in Alex Taylor out of Grimsley in Greensboro. Now, he's going to be announcing his commitment on July 29th. So that's a couple Saturdays from now. That'll be 4 p.m. Eastern time, by the way, choosing between Carolina, Clemson, Pitt State, NC State, and Virginia Tech. So again, that could be a great pickup for Carolina, beating out Clemson, beating out Penn State, once again beating out NC State and Virginia Tech. Would be big time to get Taylor. And that would give Carolina another duo of 4-star in-state wide receivers. You see, just it continues to build and would be a great thing. Keep in mind, Carolina is also in the mix for another 3-star wide receiver, Javarius Green from Shelby, North Carolina, Crest High School. He'll be announcing, he pushed back his date to August 18th. He was initially supposed to announce this week, and he'll be choosing between UNC, Bama, and Michigan State. So we'll keep our eyes on that as well. All this to say, Carolina is working on building yet another strong wide receiver class. And by the way, I didn't say, but Shipp is the 4th 4-star commitment in the 2024 class for Carolina. There had been some like, oh man, all Carolina has is 3 stars. But in recent weeks, they've really started to build out some 4 stars. Now they have 4 in the class, 2 on each side of the ball, 2 secondary guys, and then running back Davion Gauss as well. So that's great news. Now, other quick football notes before we move on. Also on Sunday afternoon, Carolina, yes, added Shipp, but they lost Carlos Mitchell Jr. on Sunday, who announced that he was reopening his commitment. He didn't say that Carolina's out, but it's one of those where it feels like he'll be going somewhere else. Listed as an athlete, 2-way player, but Carolina has recruited him as a DB. So we'll keep our eyes on that, but I don't expect him to come back around to the Tar Heels. Also on Friday of just before we got into this past weekend, Carolina landed their first 5-star football player of the 24 class in a long snapper named Grant Mills. And so it's like, hey, we'll take 5 stars any way we can get them. But this, you don't want to overlook things like this. Having a highly reliable special teams player is something that you do not want to overlook. So great news there for the Tar Heels. All right. Also late last week, it was announced by the ACC and by CW that the network was going to be broadcasting 50 ACC football and basketball games each of the next 4 academic years. The CW? What? Yeah, we'll be talking about that in just a second. All right, folks, it's a lot of glitz and glamour for Carolina and the ACC in general, I guess I should say. Always on ESPN or ACC Network. You'll get some CBS games sometimes, whatever. Lots of just high-profile stuff. But there are going to be games this upcoming academic year and for the next 4 academic years that will appear on the CW network. And so CW and the ACC announced last Thursday that they've reached a deal for CW to broadcast a total of 50 ACC football and ACC men's and women's basketball games each of the next 4 academic years. So it's not 50 total across those 4 years, like 200 total across those 4 years, divided up amongst football, men's basketball, and women's basketball. So the first one of these is going to be on September 9th, Pittsburgh hosting Cincinnati in a non-con rivalry game. Across the football season, there will be 13 ACC football games broadcast. Those will all be on Saturdays, by the way. There will be 28 men's basketball games that will air in December, January, and February. Those will be double headers on Saturdays. So I'm assuming that's just going to be 14 straight Saturdays that will have games on the CW. And then there will be 9 women's games, which will be on Sunday afternoons in December, January, and February. So we'll keep our eyes out for that. In case you're wondering, yes, 13, 28, and 9 does add up to 50. So there's that. Now, in terms of what games will be on, we'll have to wait and see on that. The way it works is that networks bid for games almost like a draft. And so we'll keep our eyes on what Carolina football or men's or women's basketball games are going to wind up there on the CW. For me, like, it's just kind of weird. When I think CW, I do not think athletics at all. They are CW, the exclusive home of Live Golf for those of you who are golfing fans. Live, for those of you who don't know, Live is this kind of thing that has gone off from the PGA Tour and is its own thing. So they live exclusively on the CW, and now this agreement with the ACC is the network's second foray into sports. So, I mean, it's cool to get to be a forerunner of this. The way it's going to go is that Raycom Sports, those of you who are ACC heads are very familiar with Raycom. Always, what they do is they sub-license games from ESPN. So they pay ESPN money and then they broadcast games. Well, what's happening is the CW then has bought the rights from Raycom Sports, but Raycom is going to produce these games for the CW, both the football and the basketball games. So that's what it's going to be. Now, again, when I think of CW, I'm like, oh, cool. High School Isaac and Dawson's Creek, right? Like reruns of just kind of silly high school shows. I guess they've got something like for those of you that like The Chosen, which is, I think, phenomenally well done, about the life of Jesus. It's on CW. So they've got some good programming. It's just, I don't know. I kind of chuckle when I see this. I'm like, really? It's CW? But that's what's happening. Like, here's the thing for me. Whenever a network first gets into broadcasting stuff, I don't like it. For example, Apple TV Plus or Apple Plus has gotten a Friday night baseball game, and I just don't like it. I don't really care for the commentators. I don't really care for their graphics packages. So I'm really curious to see, who is the CW going to contract? Are they going to get like Raycom Sports on-air talent, since Raycom is doing these games, is producing the games? What are the graphics and bugs going to look like? Will it be nicer, more up to date? Their graphics for Live Golf are kind of interesting, or like, will it be kind of cheesy and old school like Raycom Sports? I don't know. So I got to say, I'm kind of pessimistic about this whole thing, and it feels to me like a desperate grab by the ACC and Commissioner Jim Phillips to try to find ways to keep up with Big Ten and keep up with SEC, right? As the ACC has fallen behind. So we'll have to see on this. As a reminder that the current agreement with ESPN is a 20-year agreement signed back in July of 2016 and runs all the way through the 35-36 academic year. So the ACC is just doing anything they can to figure out how to do this. So perhaps this is a step forward in the competition to try to keep up, but I'm just not encouraged by this step. Obviously, all the quotes from Jim Phillips, from CW's president Dennis Miller are glowing, and we're committed to this and that, blah, blah, blah. I'm just not buying it. We're gonna have to wait and see it. Maybe I'll be blown away, and if so, I'll hold my hand up and say I was wrong. But right now, I'm not happy. Well, folks, that's it for today's episode of Locked On Tar Heels as we kick off a brand new week of the show. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. I want to remind you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Heels. You can follow me at Isaac Shape. For those of you who want to have a deeper conversation, email the show, lockedontarheels@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe, smash the like button to let us know you're here, and leave your comments on the show so you can interact with the community. I want to remind you, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be right back together on Tuesday, tomorrow, But until then, peace.